I'm Daisy.
And I'm Terri.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 161. And today it is Terri's turn to share something with us. Terri, what do you have?
Well, Daisy, this week I did not go for the shortest thing I could find, but I did find something very short, which led me to something that was very long. So let me explain. I decided to go back to another one of our favorites, Rangan Chatterjee's Feel Better, Live More. There was a recent episode. Every week he does a short clip that you can kind of get a bite-sized piece of information from. So I thought,
oh, I see where you're going with the short one that led to a long one now.
So I thought, well, this will be great. I'll listen to this and share this with Daisy and the listeners. So it is episode 367. It's a bite-sized episode, and it's called The Fastest Way to Reduce Stress and Anxiety with one of my very favorites, Dr. Andrew Huberman. So it's about 14 minutes long, and I listened to it and I thought, oh, this is great. It's got one really clear strategy that I can share, but I wonder what else there is. So then I went back and listened to the over 2-hour episode.
I was going to say, you put those two together, it's not going to be a short episode.
Yeah. And actually, I found that as I was scrolling through other episodes of this podcast, that there often are very long now.
Yes, he has gone long form.
Yeah, I thought, oh, this one sounds so good. And it was 2 hours and 43 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, I may listen to that one day while I'm doing my jigsaw puzzle or something, but I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to take notes on this and share it with Daisy and listeners. So I went back to this one, and I thought this one was a good one. And like I said, I'll pull a little bit from the longer episode, but if anyone is interested in this topic, I really do recommend going back to the longer episode and getting even more.
That's really handy, actually, where he does his bite size, because that's what he does, doesn't he? He takes the sort of the most salient 15 minutes or 15-minute chunk, and that's what he offers as the bite size. So I suppose that's quite a good way of, I'll listen to the nearly 3 hours episode while I'm doing the jigsaws, but I'll just use the bite size one to have the bit to share with you, because that's what I find so daunting. That's why I've sort of steered away a bit from the longer ones, because it's very difficult to try and condense it down. So that might be a handy way. He's sort of done half the work for us.
Well, and I think the other thing from a consumer place is that the bite-sized episodes are really kind of, here is something actionable that you can start now versus you have to listen to all of this and make a lot of sense of things and, rethink everything in your life. Just here's something you can do. So that's what I'm going to share today. So they were talking about the overall topic was about reducing anxiety. But Andrew Huberman kind of talked about, a lot of information now is coming at us about being physically and mentally healthy. And he said, in essence, to be a physically and healthy person, he thinks of it as meaning you can sleep when you need to sleep, you can focus when you need to focus, you can take action when action needs to be taken, and you can relax when you need to relax. Like those are the markers of being healthy physically and mentally. And, so often, obviously this is talking about anxiety, but he talked a lot about stress, that people are in a place where they can't relax when their body really needs for them to be able to relax. And so I really liked his way of adjusting that. And he said there really are these four, the focus of those that I just shared are four things that we need to be able to manage: attention, relaxation, rest, and sleep. He then talked about, sometimes people just think, oh, I can pay attention sometimes, or I can relax, I can go to sleep. But he said, really, it's not just whether you can and, doing big doses of any of these, but really it's more about what he referred to as like the tight hinge between the ends of this, of attention and inattention and relaxation and activation, that, there's a tight hinge there so that you can kind of go into it quickly. But that takes some training and some actual abilities for most of us and some healing.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. I'm just thinking of the when I often complain to you, that when you've had that sort of non-productive, you've got some things done, but you've done a lot of faffing about, or you've been pulled in different directions. And there's that sort of crossover period where you feel like so much time is wasted. So that really makes a lot of sense to me, to be able to train yourself to be able to make that intermediate faffing lost time bit as short as possible. And to be able to hinge from one to another.
Absolutely.
Effectively. Yeah, I like this. This is sounding interesting.
Now, the bigger episode focused a little bit more on some other things about stress, but, they did highlight this in the shorter one because it is exactly just quotes and segments from the longer episode. But really, they started talking about stress and the idea that we hear so much about stress being unhealthy. And he said, actually, that's so not true. We need stress. It is actually what moves so many of our behaviors, and actually stress helps our immune system at some level. And he used this example, and I just used this example the other day to someone. When I was a school teacher, the end of school was so stressful those last few weeks. Same thing would happen before the long winter break. These last 2 weeks are so stressful, and you're fine and you're thriving. And then you hit the break and boom, you get sick. That we actually have...
So many people say that.
Yeah. And that we actually have a mechanism that because we have the increased adrenaline while we are stressed, we're actually activating our immune system. And once that stops, that response stops. So he said this isn't just about never having stress, but again, can you get into these other states of relieving and releasing stress? And unfortunately, so many of us, based on, our modern society and modern expectations of, do more, be more, achieve more, striving for more money and more accomplishments and more things, that we do live in kind of a always activated stress level, that chronic stress, which is not healthy for us. And so he talked about learning some strategies that you could raise your stress threshold so that the trigger to stress is further away. So it's not as though those episodes or those events won't cause stress, but that there's more space in between them, that you can almost anticipate them and almost prevent the bigger impact coming. So I thought that was helpful. We also talked about the idea, and I often talk about this in my work at the fasting method, is that oftentimes when people think about what can I do for stress reduction, they think of the big things that often cost a lot of money, require tools or implements or something, and that might even involve taking breaks away from your life. Like people go on vacation and they refer to that as their stress reduction, or they go get a massage. So again, financially costly things or time away from life things. And so we talked about the importance of learning how to really capitalize on the daily things that are affordable, accessible to everyone. And Rangan Chatterjee was really in support of this, and that's really been kind of his goal in the work that he does in his books and in his podcast of helping.
Yeah, he has those little 5-minute health snacks, doesn't he?
Yeah. So I think the idea that we can relieve stress at the time that it's happening, but also that we can help kind of inoculate ourselves from some stress prevention or improve our ability to respond to stress when it does happen, I think are really important things. So one of the biggest ways we can, in the moment, relieve some stress, and also a little bit of the preventative piece, is to activate our autonomic nervous system. And he said it's a little bit misleading because autonomic means it's automatic. And he says it's not completely automatic. We can actually do some things to activate it and to use it when we need it. And one that we do every day that we could learn to use more beneficially is what he called the physiological sigh. And the idea that every 5 minutes or so, we take a deeper sigh. And if you watch your dog, Daisy, before they fall asleep, they do this. We do this. We do this in our sleep. So it's a natural part of our nervous system, going into that more relaxed place. And this comes from studies from back in the 1930s. So we've known about this for a really long time. So what this does is it tends to put a little bit of a break in the adrenaline system, just as any of these other strategies that he talks about in the bigger episode, and anyone that's looking at things about stimulating the vagus nerve, stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. It's about getting a little bit of a break from that adrenaline so that you can be in that restful state or that relaxed state. So with the physiological sigh, he talked about it's taking in a deep breath through your nose and then a quick second breath in and then a long exhale through your mouth.
Okay.
I'm going to try this and see if people can hear it, but I don't know if it's
I'm just
possible.
trying to imagine it. Yeah.
So it would basically be, so that second breath is a very quick one. And it's to the point where it's like, there's no more room. So it's a long inhale, a quick inhale, that last little bit, and then an exhale, long exhale through the mouth. He said you could do a number of these. You could do 2 or 3 of them, but even one of them, they have data that shows even that changes our nervous system and puts us in that more relaxed state. So learning something as simple as that. And one of the things I love about the 2 strategies I'm going to talk about today, but what I love about these is oftentimes when we go back to going on vacation, getting a massage, taking a bubble bath, these are not things you can do on a bus. You can't do them. You can't do them while you're in a business meeting. If you did these during a business meeting now on Zoom, you probably might lose your job. But there are things that you can't just use in any situation. But that physiological sigh, you can use that at any time.
Did they talk at all about the mechanics of it and why it works? When you first mentioned it, I thought it was mostly going to be about that long exhale. And I was thinking about how often you do that, when you've been almost sort of holding your breath because you're waiting tensely for something, and then you get the result you want. You let out that big sigh, or, you might, someone might even say to you, or you might think to yourself, just take a deep breath when you're really nervous. But then you added that extra quick inhale at the end. I wondered if there was something, if they talked about why that sort of bit is important. Because I thought it was going to be this focus on this. Yeah, breathe in through your nose, long exhale. But yeah, I'm really intrigued by this extra little bit.
I don't think even in the longer episode, I don't know that he went into the physiology of that. But I know in other episodes that I've listened to, one of the things about the breath that has to do with this is that inhaling is excitatory. It is an activating event. And exhaling is a calming, relaxing event. And so bringing in the deep breath, and I'm guessing that little breath is just that.
Even more so.
Even more so, and getting it to capacity and then releasing it. Rather than doing that with only a little bit of air. And one of the things he did mention is the idea that oftentimes when we're in a chronic state of stress, we are often doing very shallow breathing, or as you mentioned, holding our breath. And so it's so important to be bringing in that inhalation, the short little one, and then the long release. Another strategy that he talked about, not in this short episode, but in the longer episode, that I think everyone could start using right away. And I think this is one that you just have to kind of take the description of it and practice it to see what I mean. So he was referring to the idea that when we dilate our eyes, that also has a calming effect. And so we talked about, like, when you are getting more stressed, you're probably also getting more tunnel vision. And people who know very much about Andrew Huberman know that his real research line is on the eyes and how it connects to all kinds of physiological things. In the longer episode, he does talk a lot about taking in morning light, the circadian rhythm, all of these things. But in this segment, he was talking about the idea that as we get more stressed, we often have kind of tunnel vision. And if you think about it, when you are really maybe angry or stressed or your adrenaline is up, you're only seeing a little bit of what's around you. It's very focused. And so what you want to do is to dilate that, expand what's in your line of vision without moving your head. So he's not talking about that you have to start moving around, but keep your head steady, keep your eyes steady. You don't have to flit your eyes back and forth, but just focus on taking in a broader picture. Mm-hmm. And so the things over here on the side might appear, and even part of your body might appear now in your vision. And that dilation in the scope of vision is another way that we can activate that calming effect.
Interesting.
And he highlighted this is something you can do in a meeting. If you're in a job interview and notice that you're really stressed, you can do this. No one knows. But, there are other things that people would see that you are doing, and it might be more complicated. Like, I know gargling can actually activate the vagus nerve, but you probably don't want to gargle while you're in a job interview. So I think it's really important that we have some of these other strategies that we can use. He also mentioned, and he said in this episode, he said, I'm not going to go into further detail about why this is so important, but journaling. He talked about his practice of journaling every day. He said it really does help us, again, not just calm in that moment. That's not the goal of it, but that it helps us process things and helps us activate parts of our brain that really are kind of that stress inoculation. So those are the kinds of things that he talked about of, again, their focus was on reducing anxiety, but really I just saw it as a more global, bringing in a calming stress relief response and using these things throughout the day. And then if you go in and listen to the longer episode, as I mentioned, there's a lot about morning sunlight. There's a lot about some other things in there, but he also does obviously talk about the physiological sigh and the broadening or expansion of the dilation in your vision as two that you can do almost anywhere.
That's very interesting. Yeah, both of those. I like the fact that they're very easy to do. As you say, you don't need anything but yourself to do them. Especially, like I said before, I've heard about the sigh, but not that, that turbo boosted in-breath, quick inhale at the end. So sort of was a bit familiar with that. But this peripheral, being aware of your peripheral vision, I think that's really interesting, and it makes sense when you think about it. I was trying to imagine it as you were talking about it, and can feel that when it's you're focused on something or you're stressed about something, you do get that tunnel vision, and you can, when you think about it, you can see that your vision does go into that like tunnel vision. And I was just, as you were talking about it, I was just becoming much more aware of, and you wouldn't have noticed me doing it, but much more aware of what's right on the right hand side of my peripheral vision without me moving anything. I'm not moving my eyes, I'm not moving my head, and what can I see like right at the left, and what's at the top and what's at the bottom without moving my eyes anywhere. And as I was doing that, it felt a little bit like an exhale. I could actually feel the difference. I could feel that slight change in focus was very calming. So that's very, very interesting. Yeah. I'd encourage people as they're listening, were you doing the same as me? Were you trying it as Terri was describing it? And how did it feel to you? Because, I noticed a difference.
Great.
That's fascinating.
I also think another thing that they touched on briefly in this episode that is really important about these strategies is many of us are very cerebral. We're thinking about things and we're thinking about how to relieve stress. And we might even tell each other, oh, just don't think about that. Change your thoughts. Don't think like that. And that really turning to your body and letting your body activate that change can help you then change your thinking. Rather than try to change your thinking first and then your body will relax. Help your body to get into that state. And I think you will find it's almost a little harder to go back to that stressful thought pattern because now your body is in this different state. So it's a little bit of a turnaround from what a lot of us have learned, that I'm just going to stop thinking about this, or I'm going to think like this now. That's how I'm going to relieve this anxiety or this stress, which actually usually holds on to it and keeps it going. So this idea of turning to your body and letting your body's natural mechanisms, neither of these are things that you really have to train yourself to do very differently, but to really use your natural mechanisms to get into that relaxed state. So I really enjoyed, like I said, I thought even just listening to the short one, I had enough to share with you, but then I thought, oh, wait, I'm so interested in the rest. So, and I just always enjoy, and they're both interesting people, and
yes, exactly.
Just really enjoyed listening to them talk about it. So I hope everyone practices these and, like you did, see how it feels. And oftentimes when we first start a strategy, we may not feel the full effect because, you know, we're questioning it a little bit. We maybe aren't practiced with it yet. So I encourage people to really give themselves some opportunities to practice these two and see if they can help them be able to get into that more physiological, relaxed state, decrease the stress state.
Yeah, I really love easy things like that. I can remember being very aware of how I was breathing when I read about the nasal breathing. Very interesting. But I like something where it's an easy thing. You can do it and you can feel some kind of effect from it, often very quickly. Maybe not the full effect, but you can notice, you can do it. You think, oh yeah, that is a bit calming, or it does calm me down a bit when I breathe through my nose, or it does, So I like those kind of things where you can prove to yourself quite quickly, oh yeah, this is going to have an impact. Yeah. This would be worth me paying attention to as I go forward. So yes, I will be focusing on not focusing or focusing on my peripheral, but you know what I mean. Trying that one out in particular, that definitely appeals to me.
Great. Daisy, I wanted to go back to something you asked earlier about, did he talk at all about kind of the mechanism of why that extra little inhale? I don't know that this is exactly linked, but I just remembered this part of the longer interview. And he talked about some examples of when we do use that. And he talked about, for example, when you're sobbing.
Of course.
And often kind of how you stop, or as you kind of, it's like,
yeah.
So there is something about that quick, it's almost like gulping of air that then can trigger that physiological sigh.
Yes, I was thinking of hiccups as well. I mean, there's that whole, which some people swear by, others don't. I have found that it works actually, the whole drinking the glass of water upside down, which you're not exactly doing it upside down, but if you've used this, you know exactly what I mean. But the other thing that I was told for stopping hiccups, and that does work, is just to really focus on and regulate your breathing. So even if you're carrying on hiccuping, you just breathe through it. So you have breathe in for a certain length, breathe out for a certain length. Never mind if you keep hiccuping, you just keep doing it in, out, because it's a disruption of breathing is all the hiccups is. So that's another thing that it made me think of, this quick inhale. But it's interesting how they're using that to your advantage. So I'm quite fascinated about how and why that works.
Total side note about hiccuping. I have the actual cure for hiccuping, and I perfected it when I was a middle school teacher, because it wasn't uncommon for middle school students to want to have to leave the classroom. I don't quite understand why, but they would want to leave. And so one way they would often think that they should be able to leave the classroom is because they have the hiccups and they need to go get a drink of water. And with a nice, compassionate voice, I'd say, actually, I do hear those hiccups. Yeah. And rather than go to the bathroom right now, I just want you to look me in the eye and hiccup. And they couldn't. They would stand there for about 10 seconds looking in my eyes. I'd be looking in their eyes. And then they would just kind of shrug, oh, never mind, and go sit down. So again, it's something about this, stopping the pattern, doing the slowing things down. But I think I am the cure to hiccups. So Daisy, if you ever have hiccups that are really bothering you, let me know. We'll set up a Zoom meeting.
Jump on a quick Zoom.
That's right.
Look me in the eye.
And hiccup.
That's funny.
Well, I hope everyone has a week of practicing some kind of very natural ways to get into that more relaxed state. Obviously, there are other things you can do. Self-meditation. He mentioned an app that you can use, which I downloaded quickly and am just practicing using today. So lots of things that you can do to help yourself so that you don't stay stuck in that kind of overdriven adrenaline, cortisol state. And if you have the hiccups, let me know.
Have a wonderful week.